Good morning, my brothers and sisters. What a wonderful day. It was March 7, 1965, that many of you, like Charles Malden, gathered. Many of the people that gathered were young people that we should never forget. That was 56 years ago. The road to democracy began there. But Georgia is on my mind today. Georgia is on my mind because Georgia gave democracy a new boost. And because of Georgia, we have a chance to really bring about some real change in America. It is my honor to present the awards to two of the beneficiaries of that Georgia movement that began in Mississippi and Selma decades ago. The two men that I will introduce for these awards all live in Georgia. Two senators from Georgia. One, the son and survivor of the Black Holocaust. Another, the son and survivor of the Jewish Holocaust. These men from Georgia were inspired by a woman from Georgia, none other than Sister Abrams, to run for the U.S. Senate. It was thought impossible that Georgia, a deep southern state, could not only give a victory to Biden and our first woman vice president who happens to be black, but also a victory for all of the people of the United States. Because if it was not for these two senators who voted just last night or a day ago to pass a stimulus that would make all of us beneficiaries of these two men who we honor today. Brothers and sisters, without introducing in detail who they are, you know who they are. What they have in common, though, I think is extraordinary. Both of them are linked to John Lewis. One of them was a mentee of John Lewis, and other was the pastor who actually eulogized John Lewis. These two men we honor today because God works in mysterious ways. Who would have thought in 1965 that 56 years later, a black man and a Jewish man from Georgia would be the votes we needed to pass a $1.9 million stimulus? So at this time, we will hear from these giants who will serve us well. And let me just say this, when I really was so pleased with Dr. Warnock. You know, there were people who said to him, you can't talk black. You can't talk about reparations and police brutality. You're running for the Senate. You can't turn people off. He said, I'm going to stand on my principle and be who I am. And he won that election. So today, you have two men who are the most unlikely people to serve as the senators of Georgia, but they're here today to accept the leadership award because they are leading us down the path of democracy that the people in Selma and Mississippi died and fought for 56 years ago. So without further ado, I would like to give these awards, these leadership awards, to Senator John Ossoff and Dr. Raphael Warnock. Let's give them some love because all of us are going to benefit. All of us are going to benefit.
Thank you so much. Good morning, Selma. Good morning, Selma. Good morning. Thank you so much to you, Fire Rose. Thank you for your warm introduction. I want to thank as well your extraordinary partner, State Senator Hank Sanders. Y'all, please give it up for Hank. And don't worry, I can hear you honking. Please give it up for your United States Representative, Terry Sewell, my friend. Please give it up for the whip in the U.S. House of Representatives, someone whose influence is not just national but global, Congressman Jim Clyburn. Please join me in honoring my friend, my colleague, Senator Reverend Raphael Warnock. I bear greetings from Senator Warnock, who just this morning is preaching from the pulpit at Ebenezer Baptist Church here in Atlanta. And please also join me in honoring President Joe Biden, who I know will be addressing you later this morning and who has already demonstrated what wise leadership with integrity can mean and achieve at a moment of crisis like this. I want to briefly thank you and express to you why this award means so much to me and why what we've seen unfold in Georgia in these last 6 months means so much to the people of Georgia and says so much about where we stand as a people. It was 56 years ago that John Lewis and Hosea Williams and hundreds of others marched across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in your home city, daring to demand the right to vote for Black Americans in the American South. And they were undeterred by the rows of troopers who met them on the other side of that bridge. They were beaten, they were set upon by dogs and fire hoses. They were met with brutality and violence, as so many who struggled for voting rights and civil rights were in the 1960s across the American South, as so many have been throughout American history, from coast to coast, for daring to demand human rights and civil rights and voting rights. But they were undeterred. And the example of their suffering and the example of their courage had such an impact throughout this country that it paved the way for passage of the Voting Rights Act to be signed just months later by President Lyndon Johnson. And in the White House with him as that legislation was signed were many of the towering civil rights heroes of that era. And it was just 2 months ago that Black voters in Georgia, defying officials and politicians who to this day would use the force of law to disenfranchise them, that those Black voters stood in line, defied voter suppression to demand change in the state of Georgia and change in the United States at a moment of crisis. Black voters delivered that victory in Georgia. Black voters delivered that victory in Georgia. And as Faya Rose said, that victory in Georgia means that now the state of Georgia, the heart of the old Confederacy and the cradle of the civil rights movement, sent the young Jewish son of an immigrant and a Black preacher who holds Dr. King's pulpit at Ebenezer Baptist Church to represent Georgia in the United States Senate, to win the Senate majority so that we can pass landmark legislation like the stimulus bill that we passed on yesterday morning, which is the most significant economic relief bill to benefit working class and middle class Americans passed by the US Congress in generations. Voting matters, representation matters. Georgia voters made that possible. Black voters in Georgia made that possible. And without the sacrifices of those who crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge 56 years ago, it would not have been possible. 56 years is not too long. And so I guess it shouldn't be surprising that 56 years later, the power of the right to vote having just been demonstrated, that politicians here in Georgia are trying to disenfranchise Black people again, are trying to strip away the right to vote that so many bled and died for by passing voter suppression legislation that is no better than Jim Crow. And those politicians who would use the force of law to disenfranchise Black people in the American South today are no better than Bull Connor. And that's why in the United States Senate, we must pass the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. And we must pass the We the People for the People Act to end voter suppression, to protect the sacred right to vote. Because the struggle continues. You know, Congressman Lewis gave me my first job. He was my mentor for nearly 2 decades. He instilled in me the conviction to fight for justice. I'll never forget the first time I sat down for a meal with Congressman Lewis. I was 16 or 17 years old. And what he wanted to talk to me about was the alliance between Jews and Blacks in the South. Because as a young Jewish man working in the office of a civil rights legend, he wanted to impart to me his view of that history and the importance of the Black-Jewish alliance in the American South. It was 1957 when Dr. King established the SCLC in Atlanta, Georgia. It was 1958 when the temple, my synagogue where I was bar mitzvahed, was bombed by white supremacists for standing in alliance with those demanding civil rights in the American South. And Congressman Lewis told me about how after he marched across that bridge, this bridge, 56 years ago, and he was laying with a fractured skull, having nearly lost his life, being tended to by nuns, and Dr. King came and kneeled by his bedside and told John Lewis not to worry because Dr. King had put out the call, as Congressman Lewis told me, for faith leaders across the country to come to Selma and to cross the bridge again to demonstrate that those who were crusading for voting rights were undeterred by violence and could not be stopped and would march all the way to Montgomery. And the next day, it was Black preachers and Catholic priests and Jewish rabbis and people of all faiths, leaders of all faiths, who crossed the bridge again to demonstrate that defiance in the face of brutality and violence. And though we lost Congressman Lewis last year, I know he is looking down on us right now, beaming with optimism and pride that Georgia is represented in the Senate by his mentee and his pastor, a Jewish man and a Black man, that all of you and all of us are gathered here today, not just to honor and remember what they did 56 years ago, but to recommit to the movement, to recommit to the struggle, to keep carrying the torch forward, to take action, to expand human rights, to defend voting rights and civil rights, to make real America's promise of equal justice for all. Thank you so much again for this honor today. This is just the beginning. I want to again thank Faya Rose and Hank. I want to thank someone that I've come to know as a friend, Mayor James Perkins. When I made the pilgrimage to Selma just a few months ago and I sat in Mayor Perkins' office, that was a profound moment for me. Mayor Perkins, much love from the great state of Georgia. Once again, deep respect to Congressman Clyburn, Congresswoman Sewell, President Joe Biden. Much love to you all. I wish you good health. Keep the faith. Better days are coming. Thank you so much.